Welcome to the Sills Betteridge podcast. I'm Claire Macklin, specialist divorce coach, and I'll be your host today. In each episode, I'll be joined by Dominic and Yasmine Roff, who are both partners at Sills Betteridge, as we discuss the legal, practical, and emotional aspects of separation and divorce. Drawing on our combined experience, we'll share clear information, practical guidance, and have honest conversations about the issues we see most often, helping you feel better informed, more confident, whatever stage of the journey you're at. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. So, in this episode, we are going to talk about how you can best prepare for court. And from my work with clients, I know how scary, how stressful, how overwhelming and alien this can feel. And often people don't know what actually happens in the courtroom, and they're confused about the court process. Perhaps they're afraid of having to appear in front of a judge. So I hope that today we can answer some of those questions and clear up some of those concerns. So perhaps we could start by thinking about how many cases actually do end up in front of a judge. So when might it be necessary to go to court in a divorce?
Well, I think that's important to say, isn't it, Claire, that it's not inevitable that your case is going to go to
Mm.
court. Most cases don't go to court, and there's lots of things that we can do and options that we can try to avoid the court route. There
Mm.
are, however, some circumstances when it might be necessary. So if there's a dispute about the child arrangements, or if there's quite significant safeguarding concerns about children, then that might be a case where it's necessary to go to court. Or equally, if you're struggling to divide your finances with your former partner and you've exhausted all reasonable options, then again, there is a court route to take in those circumstances. Yas, you can probably fill us in on some other
Yeah,
other examples based on your experience as well, no doubt.
yeah. I think as well as not being able to agree, we often find ourselves in court when someone simply won't engage with the process. So maybe we've sent, multiple emails and letters to the former partner. They won't
Mm.
respond, or if they do respond, they won't provide what we need from them, perhaps financial disclosure. And then the only other option available to the client would then be to make a court application to compel the other person to engage in the process. And that can be really disappointing because some people they come to a divorce solicitor hoping for a cost-effective, amicable solution.
Mhm.
But if both people don't engage in that process, then we sometimes find ourselves with no choice but to make that application to court.
Yeah,
Mm.
and it's done with a heavy heart, it really is. But sometimes it's a necessary evil at the end of the day to progress a client's case. But even once the court process has started, there's still an opportunity often to reach an agreement and to end the court process. And sometimes it may be that the court process ends before we've even got to the first court hearing, because the
Mm.
simple fact of starting that process has focused people's minds and
Mm.
perhaps brought that ex-partner who wasn't engaging, perhaps it's brought them to the table.
Mm. Yes, I often hear that fear actually that, well, once we start this process, will it gallop away with me and I won't be able to stop it. And actually, yes, that's really helpful for people to know. You talked a little bit about people who don't engage perhaps in the process, and I see that a lot, and talk about a lot with my clients. And often that non-engagement can be due to all sorts of different emotional triggers.
Mm,
Perhaps your ex-partner is really afraid, perhaps they feel humiliated, perhaps one person is at a much earlier stage in the kind of grieving process through the separation, and it's just too early.
mm,
um, I think it's really easy to make assumptions about why your ex-partner isn't perhaps engaging in the process. It's really easy to assume that they are doing this to punish you or to make your life more difficult, all of those things. And so I spend quite a lot of time with clients, talking through, is that 100% true?
mm,
What else might be true? I remember working with a client a few years ago who was absolutely convinced that her ex-partner wasn't responding because she wasn't worth it. And we talked this through, and actually, when we talked through, what else might be true, she realised that actually he was also probably afraid.
mm,
He was also trying to delay the inevitable a little bit. And once, I mean, in that case, they did end up starting proceedings. But once that started, like you said, it then stopped because that actually brought everybody to the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you know that sometimes in a couple, there's one person who wants to really push it through and the other person is just not ready yet.
Yeah.
So sometimes I might be working with the person who wants to push it through, and we'll talk about, having taking a pause and allowing the other person to emotionally catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
So all of those things can perhaps feed into somebody not engaging. So what I would say is, every situation is different.
Yeah.
Talk to your therapist or your coach about your feelings around it, and avoid horror stories that you might see on social media. Social media can really whip you up into a frenzy about this kind of thing. Every situation is totally different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in terms of court hearings, so let's assume that we've started the process, and that the court process is progressing. I think it's confusing for people what each hearing is actually for or about. So can we talk a little bit about the importance of really understanding what the purpose of each court hearing is? Because people can go through several of them, can't they?
Yeah.
I think it's important that people feel able to ask their solicitor to explain what each hearing will entail, because some hearings might be no more than 15 minutes long, logged into remotely by video call, and done before you know it. Whereas as other hearings might last a day or even longer than a day, in which case it's really important to know exactly what you're approaching, how best to prepare for it, what you might need to do beforehand, what you might need to bring with you. So asking your solicitor to explain, what is this hearing? What are we hoping to achieve at the as an outcome? And what can I do to prepare myself?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
helpful, isn't it, if you can, to schedule time with your solicitor before the court hearing to go through those questions. And often as well, it might be helpful to know that before a court hearing, we often prepare a document called a position statement, which summarizes what our client's position going into that court hearing is. And it's really important that the clients have time to read that, review it, and that will help with hopefully their preparation for the court hearing as well, and maybe a telephone call to discuss that.
Yeah. And I think, we talked about this in our previous podcast as well, not to be afraid to ask questions, not understanding exactly what your upcoming hearing is actually going to entail, is a really normal human thing to feel. And so, ask any questions that you need to. Let's talk first of all then about if you're actually going in person to the court and what that looks like, because lots of people think or fear that it's going to look like something off the television, and you're going to be in a dock, and you're going to be, it's going to be a judge with a wig on and so on. So what does it actually look like? Who will actually be there, and what might the room look like?
It's very different. The reality of going to court in this country is very different to what people see on TV, maybe from US dramas. The reality is it's likely to be quite an informal environment, in as much as the judge won't be wearing a wig. They won't be sat in the dock. They probably, in most hearings, won't even be asked to say anything if they have legal representation. But if you've never been to court before, it's probably worth people knowing that when you arrive, you do have to go through sort of airport style security, and there are security guards. So making sure that you're not carrying anything in your bag, for example, any sharp items, including I once had a metal fork for my salad taken off me. Liquids will be checked and taken off you if they aren't a drink. So perfume, don't have that in your bag. They won't allow you to take that through. But going there knowing that you will go through that security process, just like you do when you're boarding a flight, is probably really helpful for people to know, so that they can prepare accordingly and not have a bag filled with nails, scissors, and forks and perfumes.
It's really important. It's important to know that, because if you didn't, it would feel a bit invasive having your bag checked by a security guard. And if you're already in a quite a stressful, emotionally charged state, then that will could disrupt, get off to a bad start. Yeah, so being aware that there is that security is really, really important. And as Yaz says, being prepared, so only really taking the essentials with you will make sure that you can get through that process quickly, and you
Yeah.
won't, it's not going to be a 10-15 minute job.
Yeah, perhaps a really good idea might be to have a kind of court bag.
Yeah,
So you've got a particular bag that you take the things that you need
yeah,
for court, post-it notes, a pencil,
yeah,
all those things that I think people can take in bottles of water, things like that. So yeah, have a bag that's sort of ready, prepared that you can pick up
yeah,
easily on the day. Um, a lot of people I know that, and well, I know I've had some clients before who have made an appointment and gone into the court and had a look around and they've worked out where the toilets are and where the room is that they're going to be and things so on beforehand. I don't know if that's the same in every court or whether that's just the local one to me is quite open and friendly like that. I
Lots of
don't know if
courts
you,
yeah, they will allow people to go and have a look beforehand.
right.
In our local court in Nottingham, you don't need to be there for a hearing that day necessarily to be granted access to the building. So if you want to go and work out where you're going to park beforehand, if parking is difficult in the area, work out where the entrance to the building is.
yeah,
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where there's been domestic abuse, your solicitor can ask for special measures on your behalf so that you
Mm,
can enter through a separate entrance
hmm,
and kind of avoid the risk of running into your former partner if that's something that's causing
yeah,
anxiety for you. And I also
yeah.
think if people are really worried, arranging to meet their solicitor or barrister in a coffee shop locally beforehand and then walking to the court building
yeah,
together, that can be a really nice way to kind of settle the nerves before you even get there.
yeah,
Yes, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about sort of a visualization technique that people can use. And so actually knowing where the car park is, knowing where you're going to meet your solicitor and so on can be really helpful to your emotional preparation as well. You talked a little bit just now about special measures. Are there, and we were talking about special measures for coming into the court. What other special measures are available for if you are actually in the hearing, for people who might find themselves in that situation?
yeah. So there's a range of special measures that might be available. So screens in court is quite routine now in the family
Mm,
courts, where there has been allegations of domestic abuse. A physical screen can be put up in court so that you don't come into direct contact with your former partner. It's also
mm,
possible to have sort of separate waiting areas in the court building, separate entrances and exits. It may be that you might be permitted to attend remotely, perhaps as well, as a special measure. And there's also been progress made in not allowing sort of direct questioning from a former partner
mm,
to you. That unfortunately used to happen, but that should not happen now. So you shouldn't be
mm,
cross-examined by your former partner
mm,
either. So yeah, there's a toolkit, and the courts have got better. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but the courts have got better at recognizing the highly stressful scenario of going to court, the prospect of perhaps facing your ex-partner or your ex-abuser
mm.
can be really damaging. So the courts try to get better at allowing special measures.
Great, thank you. And then another practical question around what should I wear? What's the right attire to wear to go into your court hearing? I've had this conversation lots of times with clients. So what's your advice on that?
I've also had this question lots, Claire. My advice is always, dress smartly. It's a professional environment, but wear
Mhm.
something that you're comfortable in and don't feel that you have to go out and buy something special. So
Yeah,
if you don't own a suit, that's okay. Just wear some smart trousers and a shirt.
yeah,
Um, making sure that people feel comfortable in what they're wearing. I'm sure is, your area than it is mine. But from my perspective, as long as they look smart,
yeah.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to
So
afford the court and the judge that respect. You want to get
mm,
off on a good start, and that's really important. So smart casual, I would
yeah.
say.
Okay. So on an emotional level, there's some quite interesting things that people that I talk about with people that they can start to think about. One of them is colour. So
Okay.
different colours will have an impact on how you feel quite often. So if you, it, like a dark blue is quite sedate, I suppose, and very
Mm,
businesslike.
Hmm.
and it may help you to feel more businesslike yourself. Red, and red's quite an aggressive colour.
Hmm.
But I do sometimes help clients to have a little secret bit of red that they can, like a little red ribbon in a pocket,
Hmm.
or something like that, that they can touch, that will just remind them that they do have presence and that they
Yeah.
can feel empowered in the situation. I've also had clients who have purchased a whole court outfit that they only will wear for that,
Yeah.
only wear it for court. They're only ever going to wear it for court. They might sell it on afterwards or something. But having something that will help you to feel as strong as you possibly can, something that helps you feel like you want to put your shoulders back and you want to
Yeah.
hold your head up high, in terms of thinking about how what you're going to wear is going to how it's going to make you feel when you're in that courtroom, especially if you are feeling really anxious or really nervous. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that I talk about with my
Yeah.
clients.
That's really interesting. And, just having that outfit prepared, so on the day of the
Hmm.
court hearing,
Yes,
you're not suddenly thinking, oh gosh, what do I need to wear, and getting, flustered by that. Having
yes,
that prepared, set out, that is
yeah,
all going to help. Yeah,
yes.
it is.
Make it as easy as possible for yourself. So yeah, have everything set out. That will come into the visualization strategy as well that I'll talk about in a bit. Um, are all so I know the answer to this. Not all hearings are in person. So some hearings are going to be remote. Can you tell us a little bit about remote hearing and how you help clients to prepare for those?
Yeah, I mean, remote hearings, people can log in from their home environments if they're comfortable there. Or I often say to clients, if you're worried about the technology, if you're not very good at tech, feel free to come into my office and sit with me in the same room and I can log on. We can both join from the same screen.
Yeah.
And I do find that that's probably the choice that most clients are making.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
people are very welcome to log on from home, and providing they've got somewhere that's quiet and where they won't be disturbed, preferably not going to be disrupted by the door going or, a dog barking furiously for 30 minutes straight. And providing they are in a quiet environment, it's absolutely fine for people to log on from
Yeah.
home. Something I probably would say is the court doesn't always send out the hearing links in advance. So people often panic thinking, oh my goodness, it's 20 minutes until the hearing and I've not got the link. And sometimes, unfortunately, that's normal. And so just keep in contact with your solicitor. Often I'll set up a WhatsApp group so that they can message me on WhatsApp or by message as the hearing progresses. I can take their instructions that way. And if we've instructed a barrister, we can have a group with the barrister in as well so that we can communicate kind of behind the
that's a brilliant
scenes.
idea. Yeah, that's very much like in a real courtroom, you would maybe take post-it notes and scribble something and pass it along.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
WhatsApp group is a really great idea.
It's the modern
Yeah.
post-it
Just
note.
just to kind
Yes.
of clarify, I guess by remote hearing, what we're kind of talking about is a video
Mm.
link, aren't we? There
Yeah.
used to be, during the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of telephone hearings, court hearings, where you would just attend
Right.
by telephone. But now, in my experience, when we say remote hearings, it's a video call. That's the format that it would take. And
Yes.
absolutely, the importance of having a designated space in your house where it's private, is really, really important.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
have, not my cases, but I've heard of cases where people attend and they're on public transport or they're out in the street, and the judge will just tell you to log off the hearing and
Mm.
go to a private place, and that's not going to be a good start to the court hearing.
No. I was just thinking as well about, we talked about special measures in terms of actually being in the courtroom. And I've had conversations with a couple of clients in the past who were having remote hearings,
Hmm.
and they were concerned about actually seeing their ex's
Mm.
face on the screen.
Hmm.
Um, Post-it notes come in really handy there too. So you can you
That's a good
can
idea.
cover up part of your screen
Mhm.
if need be.
That's a great
Um,
idea.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just a
Yeah.
very practical thing that just popped into my head
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Um, I know that sometimes people can have sort of an emotional support person with them, who perhaps goes with them to the court. Maybe they wait in a waiting room or whatever. And it's just worth clarifying. Are you allowed to have somebody sitting with you in a remote hearing?
Not during the
No.
actual hearing itself. So in the same way that if we were in a court building, perhaps a friend or family member might come along to sit in the waiting room so that they're not alone, but then would have to wait behind while the actual hearing itself takes place. Without the court's permission, third parties aren't allowed to enter hearings, and that includes remote hearings. So for the hearing itself, they would need to be in a private room with the door shut where they can't be overheard. And it's just worth saying as well that it's not permitted to take recordings of private recordings on your phone, for example, of court hearings. So please don't be tempted to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. But let's move on, I think, now to some sort of more emotional preparation stuff. I've kind of talked a little bit about the visualization process that I use with a lot of my clients. I call this being the Steven Spielberg of your own mind. So you can prepare in advance by imagining yourself going through the process of going to your court hearing. So I talk clients through, you some people like to close their eyes and do it, other people do it with their eyes open, or they practice in front of a mirror. But in your mind, what you do is you run through a movie. So you start this movie with yourself at home, getting dressed, wearing the clothes that you are going to wear to the hearing. You visualize yourself traveling to that hearing, arriving, parking, everything going really well. Perhaps you're meeting your sister in the coffee shop, and then you're walking into the courtroom. And then you visualize yourself going through the whole process, visualizing yourself doing that to the best of your ability, staying calm, managing everything really well. And you keep visualizing it right through until that hearing is finished, and you have got back into your car and you've gone back home, or you've met your friend, or whatever it is you're going to do afterwards. And what that does is it helps your brain to start to rehearse. Because your memory and your imagination, they fire the same kind of circuits in your brain. So if you can imagine yourself going through this process really successfully, a number of times, I say to clients, start doing this 2 weeks before, do it 3 times a day, do it before you go to sleep at night, whenever's good for you, run through it, run through it, run through it. But that means that by the time you actually doing it in real life, your brain goes, oh yes, this is familiar. I know what's happening here, and I know what I'm doing, and it can help to take away or reduce some of the anxiety about going through it in reality. Another thing that I talk about with clients often is doing a kind of little ritual before they go in. So that ritual might be, and you can use this in your visualization as well. So you might, for example, go into the toilets beforehand and do a kind of little, I'm going to roll my shoulders back. I'm going to stand with my head high. I'm going to hold my hands up, and I'm going to put a grin on my face. It sounds bonkers, but it actually helps you to feel more powerful. And you can do this in a space where no one can see you. Do that, and immediately you feel like your shoulders are further back and that you are feeling stronger. So these are just some ways that you can help yourself to feel more confident. You can also make sure that you know your numbers. Make sure that you've got all the information that you need in your bag. And also focus then, as you go through the hearing, focus on what you have control over. One of those things is your own breath. So if you find that your emotions are really rising, and perhaps your ex-partner, their solicitor is saying something that you really disagree with, for example, focus on and practice this beforehand as well. Breathing in and counting to 4, breathing out and counting to 4 in your mind, just very simple. Or you could use your fingers and breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. That is help bring oxygen back into your brain, and it kind of helps to calm your emotional responses, because it's going to be really important for you to try and stay as calm as you can through that hearing. So strategies like that are really going to help. You might also have some mantras that you say to yourself in your mind. Think about what might be the most helpful thing for you to say to yourself. It might be, I can handle this. This is hard, but I can get through it. Or it might be, when this is over, I'm going to go and meet my best friend, and we're going to have coffee, and it's going to be okay. So just something to sort of to go through in your mind in those moments when you feel those emotions rising.
Absolutely.
I've also had one client who took in a picture with her she had a picture of herself on a beautiful beach, and it was a lovely memory that she had. She took that picture in because whenever she looked at that picture, it helped her to feel calmer and it helped her to feel stronger. And I had another client who took in something of her dad's. Her dad was no longer with us, but was always very supportive and a very strong presence in her life. So she took in something of his so that whenever she felt those emotions rising, she could touch that thing
Yeah.
and it would really help to ground her. So there are all kinds of strategies that you can use to emotionally help yourself to feel as calm and as level as possible through the
I,
process.
I,
And they'll
I
change depending on the person.
yeah, I agree, and I see how the importance of that because whatever we as solicitors can do, whether it's getting special measures in place, making sure that we've got the case prepared, at the end of the day, it's nobody wants to be in a courtroom, and it is. I'm not going to say, well, it can be distressing, but it can be a difficult environment. So if you've got those techniques, you've done that preparation work, it's going to help. It is going to help, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not going to
Yeah,
make it a walk in the park,
it
but
is out
it's
of the
absolutely going to
ordinary.
help.
Yeah, and
Mm.
like I've said, we can do all we can to make that hearing as smooth as possible. But for most people, going to court is out of the ordinary. Yeah,
Mhm.
will never have done that before. Yeah, it's an alien environment to most people.
Yeah.
So all of that work is really going to help.
Mm. Another thing I think is really important is in the run up to your hearing. It's quite easy to get absolutely absorbed by that and not think about or do anything else.
Yeah,
And the importance of looking after yourself in the
Mm.
run up to that hearing is really important. So making sure that you do take half an hour out to go for a walk in an evening or
yeah,
go paddle boarding or do whatever it is that you can lose yourself in or
yeah,
spend time, with your closest friend, whatever that might be, to do that because it's there's a story about holding a glass, isn't there? I can hold this glass here and I can hold it here comfortably for a minute or two. After that, my arm starts to ache a bit, but if I try and hold it all day, I'm I'm going to really do some damage to my muscles. So I need to put the glass down. And going through a divorce and only thinking about your divorce is a bit like holding that glass.
hmm
So really important to take a bit of time out
yeah,
to do something that you love in the days and weeks before any hearing that you might have.
yeah.
Before we finish, there was one thing that I wanted just to raise, which was social media. And I know it's really tempting to vent on social media, to talk about how you feel on social media. I always say to my clients, don't go there. It's like torture, torture by social media. It's putting yourself back in a position that you don't want to be in. Um,
Yeah.
from a legal perspective, posting on social media could be very problematic, I think. So, could you just give us your advice on use of social media in terms of court hearings and preparation?
My view, Claire, is that people should just stay off it as much as they can, really. Nothing good comes from posting about
No.
your emotional separation on social media. Certainly wouldn't advise anyone to ever post about any court proceedings. Most family proceedings are held in private, and it would be enormously frowned upon by a judge if someone was found to be posting the details of what was said during court proceedings or decisions that were made. So yeah, my advice is absolutely stay off it. But do confide in, if you've got a close trusted friend or perhaps a family
Mm.
member who offers a lot of emotional support, alongside working with a coach or a therapist where you can kind of unpack the emotions of the court process or the separation, in private. That's from
Yeah.
my
Mm.
perspective the way to go, really.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's just a bad idea. I think the only time it's never helpful for a case. It's always unhelpful for a case. And I can
Mm.
think of examples where we have used it as evidence, somebody's social media posts.
Mm.
We've then, as the other side of the party to the case, use that as evidence
Mm.
for my client's case. So it's normally a complete own goal.
Yes, yeah. I think it chimes with something that I talk about a lot with clients around dignity as well. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
I remember when I was going through my first divorce, I felt like I had dignity at all times kind of emblazoned across the front of my mind. And I think it ties into that, doesn't it? It might feel really great at that moment in time to vent on social media, but it's not going to do you any favors further down the line. So do that venting privately with your friend or with your therapist, or in your diary, but not on social media.
Yeah.
So let's just very quickly, recap. What would be, I suppose, what would be your top tip if you had to say one thing to a client who's sitting in front of you, really worrying about court? Of all the things we've talked about, what would be your top tip? Let's give one top tip each, perhaps.
I think mine would probably be to keep the dialogue open with your solicitor and raise any concerns or queries you have, whether they're practical about how do I get there and where do I park, or whether they're about the substance of the hearing and whether you will be expected to say anything. If you have legal representation in most hearings, the answer will be no, you don't need to say anything. But keep that dialogue open, ask the questions that are bothering you, and let your solicitor guide you through the process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was going to be my top tip, but I'll give a different one, which is, I think prepare practically what you can. So, like you said, Claire, these are things that you can control. Get your outfit ready, get your court bag ready, get to court a little bit early. Sometimes being prepared just sets off things on a good start.
Yeah. And for me, my top tip would be preparing emotionally, acknowledging how you're feeling about an upcoming hearing, and really thinking about strategies that will help you to feel calmer in the run-up and also through the hearing itself.
Yeah.
So thank you ever so much, both of you. I hope that we have given some really clear, helpful guidance to people to help reduce the overwhelm that perhaps people feel often when they are facing a court hearing. One of my favourite things to say to people about overwhelm is that the antidote to overwhelm is clarity. And I hope that we have given people some clarity today that they can take away and use to help themselves prepare better. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.